Okay, if I remember correctly, I told myself being in the middle of the woods, far from the getting ready to be old Shadowpasta mansion, I had everything needed to enter the Shadow Realm. A knife and small tent. The time is just near dusk now. I set up the tent and put it near the tree, so much so that the trunk was showing inside the tent. I carved a symbol into the bark of the tree and dropped the knife beside me, causing it to stick into the ground. I closed my eyes and began to sing the song of Shadow Sorrow. Disappear into the dark, lights are nowhere to be seen flickering. Too late to turn back now, the path is too close to the end. Wear your best clothes, you won't be coming back any time soon, my dear. I, I knew myself better than this. What happened? The shadows, they grabbed me. I was hiding. I was half dead. Now they swallowed me. Goodbye to my world. Hello to the Shadow Realm. After singing, a portal opened up against the tree bark, the tree trunk. I'm gonna save her. I'm gonna bring my sister back. I am going to bring her back. Izzy, I'm coming. Without giving it a second thought, I jumped into the void with my gun and knife. My heart was racing and it felt like I could collapse at any time, but I couldn't give up for my little sister's sake. Once inside, I landed on the ground in front of a tree-looking rock. The Shadow Realm was bare in scenery, but despite that, it looked dark, as if it was a closed room lit the flames, with red flames. Catastrophe's reign had taken more of a toll than I had thought it would. The trees looked like oak trees. They had grown as tall as jungle trees. The terrain was rough and rocky with holes, but there were few. Looking up, I could see the Shadow City not far. The path was lit with red flame torches. I walked down the path, stepping on twigs, black leaves, and on occasions lizards or small animals. Once the gates of the city, Once at the gates of the city, I walked in. Skylar was Skylar walked into the city, not knowing of what was waiting for her, but still continued walking. She went to her old home. Inside she found rubble, Ezzy's old clothes and rotting beds. She also found dry blood, most likely from where the old house was being used as an execution and torture house. She walked out, being greeted by guards of the Shadow Realm city. Her eyes widened as they closed in on her, causing her to back up. She placed her hand on her hip, where her knife was. One of the guard, One of the guards ran at her and used a shadow spear to jab her. Thankfully, she did dodge this. The Shadow Realm weapons were very dangerous. Not only were they doused with doused in poison and sometimes strong knockout liquid, but could they could and would mess with your mental state, sending you on the road to insanity. Damn it, this is bad. I barely missed that. I looked at the guards and immediately kicked off the ground into my old home. Inside, I ran up the stairs. They followed me, of course. One of them tackled me, but thankfully I pulled out my knife and stabbed them in the shoulder. However, they did hold me down long enough for another to stab a spear near my head. My eyes couldn't get any bigger at this point. I swear, I gritted my teeth as yet another guard grabbed my ankles. I kicked them and kicked them in the face. I kicked them off and kicked them in the face. I kneed one of them in the balls and pushed him off. Once he was off, I grabbed the hilt of the spear and turned it around, thrusting it into the man's head, who had originally had a hold of me. I had a hold of it. I jumped up as the last two ran after me. I went to the roof and ran, jumping roof to roof. Only one guard followed me, and they were quick. I heard a trigger clicking and jumped into the air, spinning around, now seeing the man holding a gun. I knew him. I I know him. He's Jared. No way. Jared wouldn't. Would he? By the time I turned and realized it was him, the bullet from his gun had already passed through my side, sending me down between the houses. I let out a small scream on, on impact with the ground. Upon pulling myself up, I held my side. This was when Jared jumped down and laid me back down by landing above me, both legs on either side of me, with the sword to my throat. I growled slightly. "Jared, where's Izzy? I need to find her," I told him in an attempt to reach whatever of his mind was still there. He took his sword away. "Izzy." I sat up cautiously, soon standing and holding my side. "Yes, my baby sister. Where is she?" Jared looked at me dead in the eyes as he moved quickly. Sensing the movement, I took my gun out just in time to block his sword, but it put me against the wall doing so. I gritted my teeth in anger and growled. Jared grinned widely as a sharp pain went through my neck. "Let me show you," he whispered, getting close to my ear as he pulled the syringe needle out of my neck. I pushed him back. "Jared!" I yelled, already getting dizzy from whatever drug was in the syringe. "I can't." I pointed the gun at him, stumbling a bit. I can't believe." My hands lowered, dropping the gun. Jared lowered his sword and walked up to me, placing a hand on my neck. "Can't believe what?" He brought my face closer to his as my eyes began to close. "That you found me? Or that your old crush is doing this to you?" he seemed to whisper. I closed my eyes once as my hand dropped off of my wounded side. I opened them back up to see Jared's grin still plastered on his face. "If you think shit sucks now, my little doll, just wait till you wake back up." That was the last thing I heard before passing out. My eyes snapped open and I sat up. I didn't know how long I had been asleep, but I knew I was still in the shadow realm. My wound was healed, but not my mental state. I growled slightly and grabbed my head, trying to stop the new demons that had entered. Around the time I stood up, Jared unlocked the door and walked in. I watched him and forced myself not to punch him. If I had, then the demons would consume me faster. I closed my eyes and faced him as he grabbed my arm and dragged me out of the room. I started to pull away, but decided to let him drag me. We arrived at Catastrophe's throne room. She stood up grinning. Well, well, if it isn't darling little Skylar. She chuckled and stood in front of me. My eyes apparently flashed red because then she said, "Oh dear, are you mad?" and laughed. I gritted my teeth once again and gripped my pants. She grinned and swung her hand at me. I caught her wrist and kicked her backwards. "Where's Ezzy?" I yelled. Catastrophe grinned and pointed at two-way glass near the ceiling, showing Ezzy looking at me. My eyes widened, seeing her alive and well. I teared up as she saw me through. Reading her lips, I could see she said, "Sissy." Catastrophe took the chance to punch me while I was staring at Izzy in surprise. I fell back from the punch and gritted my teeth in pain. I sat up and stood only to be punched in the stomach. I soon realized it wasn't a punch but a stab with a small but sharp shadow knife. I stumbled back, holding my stomach, and finally I heard Izzy screaming, Big sister, don't hurt her!" she cried. I coughed up a bit of blood, and as Catastrophe laughed, I stood up straight, hearing this, and wiped my mouth. About your question earlier, I put my hand on the handle of my gun, a backup in my boot. "Yes, I am mad, and I will kill you," I growled loudly, looking at Catastrophe with bright red eyes. Skylar pulled her gun out and shot at Catastrophe. She dodged and appeared behind her, kicking her into the ceiling. Sky yelped and fell to the ground, but with what energy she had, she shifted in the air and landed on her feet. She stood up like a rag doll, however, now about to lose control of her demons. Catastrophe smirked at this and tackled Sky to the ground, causing Sky to cough up a bit of blood. She squeezed her eyes shut and kicked her off, sending her into the air. Sky stood up and pulled an extendable rod out of her thigh strap. She pressed the button, extending it, and ran at Catastrophe with glowing red eyes. Her rage built up with each sad thought of leaving her sister behind. Once Catastrophe was on the ground, she kicked her in the stomach, sending her back into the only colorful thing in the room, which was a vase full of blue roses. Sky walked up to her, only to get tripped and punched into a wall. The demons laughed louder in Sky's head, to the point where she laid on her back, covering her ears and screaming. Catastrophe laughed at this. That's right, let them consume you. Be the shadow you were meant to be, Skylar. Catastrophe walked over and watched her. As he began to cry louder, Please don't! Leave my sister alone! Leave her alone, please! She whined and fell to her knees, hitting the glass. It was too thick for the child to break, however, it did bruise her hands. Skylar finally stopped screaming and stood up. She had brought an emergency measure with her, just in case she had gotten too hurt to move. She pulled out a glass case and opened it. Catastrophe grinned. Need the glasses, dear, to see how you die? Sky never responded, but she did drop the glass case, revealing a syringe and adrenaline shot. She stabbed it into her arm where a vein was and shot the liquid straight into her. Soon the adrenaline kicked in and she was off, repeatedly hitting and kicking Catastrophe. Catastrophe dodged most of the attacks, and finally, being fed up with Skylar's adrenaline shot, she grabbed her throat and threw her into the blue petals. Sky stood up, but Catastrophe pulled the dual swords out and tripped her. It's time you wake up, Skylar, and feel the pain of your death. As he screamed louder and louder as Sky tried yet again to sit up, Catastrophe pulled the dual swords over her head and stepped on Skylar's stomach, laying her down. Skylar's eyes went back to normal as she winced from the pain in her stomach. Seeing the swords, her eyes widened. She tried to sit up, but the dual sword blades came down and stabbed into each of her shoulders, receiving a loud scream. Her hair began to dye red from the crimson blood flowing from her shoulders. Tears swelled her eyes as she tensed up, now being pinned to the ground. I don't want to die. I want my sister back. Izzy, I'm so sorry. I couldn't save you. Sky squeezed her eyes shut as Catastrophe's foot hovered over her head. Izzy screamed, and the crack of some bones was the last thing Sky heard.